think that this is not a circumstance in which, large financial institutions who are, arguably earning excess rents right now are saying, oh, that's never going to take away my margin. Everybody's aware. Everybody's aware it's coming, and they're preparing for that inflection point where it's all of a sudden, okay, I have to pivot, I have to give up that, but I'm going to build efficiency. This is not going to be where people, I don't think, maybe some are going to be asleep at the switch.
On any documentation in the UK, the whole UK system can go digital, and then we can really switch on. A system can go digital, and then we can really switch on.
Not going to be where people, I don't think, maybe some are going to be asleep at the switch, but I think for the most part, people know this is coming. It's going to change their business models, but it's going to make them more efficient. So it's one of these, low revenue, higher margin opportunities, and it's just, as soon as it starts to happen, I think it's going to be,
issuers who drive it for financial products, and I think that's going to happen in the next couple of years.
All of that wild experimentation and investment is here to stay. I don't know, I haven't been around that long, but I've been around long enough to know that technology never really goes back in the box. Once it's out of the box, it just keeps progressing and evolving, and it eventually becomes an integral part of our lives. And so likewise, as it relates to shared ledgers, digital assets, blockchain, this is not going back in the box. It doesn't matter how long this crypto winter is, this technology is out in the world.
If we think about the opportunity, how we get to beyond the 1 trillion, I would start with private asset space is a $290 trillion market around the world. That's bigger than publicly traded securities. That's things like real estate, private equity, VC. And that's, in our view, one of the killer apps for blockchain, because these are operationally intensive. It's assets to issue and manage. They're non-price discoverable, non-transferable, tradable. And when you put those assets natively on chain, you begin to create more liquidity, more tokenization and fractionalization, broader access and availability of those assets.
We always look for real-world use cases.
What is the use case? And what's the use case, you would ask?
Start finding real use cases.
But the smart guys are really looking for the use cases.
I think it will be use case driven. So
we are looking for the use cases. We are looking for the products.
And I don't think this is decades off. I think this is years off. And I think we're going to start to see it accelerate, particularly with a tighter regulatory framework.
Finally, in the last seconds I have, are you engaging with stakeholders in the banking world and soliciting their input? Because so far I can't find any bankers that are real warm and fuzzy about this right now.
I'm having conversations with the leaders of large banks and other brokers and asset managers, and I think the general consensus is a bit of skepticism, but also a bit of, I'm going to stay on the sidelines as long as this market remains unregulated. I do think a number of the heads of these organizations and institutions view this as a viable, or at least some of the tokens, as a viable financial instrument and one that their clients want exposure to, but they certainly don't like the idea of getting involved in markets that are unregulated. As much as they may complain about US regulation, they in fact like US regulation because it's clear, it's predictable, and there's law enforcement behind it.
So we think that that's going to be a huge paradigm shift for the alternatives.
As you put it, a huge paradigm shift, and I like that you said it was your North Star for my fellow panelists.
Fundamentally, was financial services being re-platformed? Were we on a paradigm shift here? And we'll be the North Star for you all, or kind of that moonshot, if you will, from where you sit.
Well, if we fast forward a decade, my humble belief is a majority of financial assets will have been issued natively as digital assets on a blockchain, traded on a blockchain. That is hugely disruptive to how financial services works today, which is via permissioned intermediaries. And I think public blockchains offer the opportunity to catalyze greater innovation in the space than we've seen to date. And this is finance's internet moment, right? This is when the financial architecture changes materially. It's having been in financial services for a long time now, It really is the most significant development in terms of lowering the cost to serve, ultimately, providing broader access to a range of particularly alternative products, and opening up more access and innovation. So when we fast forward, we're building the bridge across Death Valley right now, slat by slat, asset class by asset class, use case by use case, with the coalition of the willing and able. And we are going to get there, and it'll be a lot more efficient in finance.
For Broadridge to ride and take advantage of. What are some trends that particularly excite you as you look to the future?
So, I start with digital assets, and I'll kind of combine digital assets and Web3 into this kind of big bucket, right? And people talk about cryptocurrencies and NFTs. I'm going to think about it a little bit more broader in the use of the technology. What really excites me here is, in the mid to late 90s is when the internet first kind of, came on the scene. I worked and ran, along with a small team, we put together a small consulting firm. There was 5 or 6 of us. And we were working with financial services companies as they were just starting to go online. And all the promise of the internet and what that meant. And we got bought, and that had several names and different roll-ups of different things that happened. But, we went through the dot-com bubble burst. And what we saw after the dot-com bubble burst was arguably the most innovative period that we've ever seen in our lifetimes, right? In a 20-year period, we saw these behemoth organizations come out of nowhere, whether it's Amazon or Google or Facebook, Meta, a different type of Microsoft, cloud computing, so much innovation happening in such a short period of time. And so what I see with Web3 is really this kind of almost return. Like, we're going to go back to the beginning, and we have an opportunity to
If we think about the opportunity, how we get to beyond the $1 trillion.
Rethink a lot of the things that have been done here.
I do believe, and I think everybody here believes, that we are at a turning point and people are starting to understand, and they're really leaning in and thinking about, okay, what's my first use case? What can I actually do here?
And so, as with all things, it takes time.
Not all old things are bad, and it takes some time for things to develop. For instance, the light bulb was invented, and it took 40 years before there were street lamps with light bulbs. So we're right on schedule with 35 years ago, private blockchains being invented, and we're about 5 years away from scale adoption. That's good news.
And we really identified very early on that cross-border payments and moving value across borders was where we wanted to play and go after. We've been doing that for 10 years. It takes time, and it's taken a lot of effort to build a network now over 70 countries. But the underlying goal hasn't changed from the beginning. And
multiple regulated institutions. And so, as with all things, it takes time. And, furthermore, whilst the crypto asset class is kind of having its winter moments, and, there certainly have been a lot of mistakes happening in that industry, I think the key thing to note here is that the technology that was spawned from all of that wild experimentation and investment is here to stay. I don't know, I haven't been around that long, but I've been around long enough to know that technology never really goes back in the box. Once it's out of the box, it just keeps progressing and evolving, and it eventually becomes an integral part of our lives. And so likewise, as it relates to shared ledgers, digital assets, blockchain, this is not going back in the box. It doesn't matter how long this crypto winter is, this technology is out in the world. People have invested an enormous amount of money and time and talent into it. It's just gonna get better. And really what we're kind of gunning for is that it gets so good that it becomes invisible. No one talks about it anymore. I mean, it'll be bad for us because then we won't get to see you guys on stage anymore, because it'll be like blockchain, womp, 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 super boring. Let's not talk about it on stage, because everyone's just using it like email or like websites or mobile apps.